He's the famous TV pastor leading one of the largest congregations in the country.
If you're ever in our area, please stop by and be a part of one of our services. We're praying for you.
The inspirational messages pack his Houston church with thousands. But this morning, Pastor Joel Osteen in the spotlight.
What happens when a man who never wanted the spotlight is suddenly thrust into it? When faith, family, and fortune collide on a stage bigger than life. Joel Osteen's story is not just about a church or a sermon. It is about transformation, the power of media, and the magnetic pull of hope in a world hungry for answers. From humble beginnings to leading the largest church in America.
Sunrise for Joel Osteen, touted as the pastor of America's largest church. The televangelist drew a crowd of thousands at the BB&T Center.
His journey raises deep questions. Can faith thrive amid fame and fortune? How does one balance spiritual leadership with the temptations of success? And what is the cost of preaching hope in a world that craves certainty? This is the story of a reluctant pastor turned global phenomenon, whose message inspired millions but also sparked fierce debate. From quiet beginnings to an unseen power. Joel Osteen was born into a world dominated by faith. Growing up in Houston, Texas, in a family of 6 children, church was more than a weekly ritual. It was the very heart of their lives. His father, John Osteen, had left the traditional Southern Baptist church to create a new path of charismatic Christianity, one that embraced healing, miracles, and deep personal transformation. The family's faith was tested and solidified when Joel's sister, Lisa, was born with severe disabilities in 1958. This profound challenge drove the family even deeper into their beliefs, sparking a passion for spiritual healing that would shape their future.
I believe God sees the tears, He sees the injustice, He sees what's wrong, and God is a God of restoration, He's a God of justice, He's a God of payback.
In 1959, John and Dodie Osteen planted Lakewood Church in a tiny, rundown feed store that held only 234 people. It was a modest start, but from this small seed, a powerful movement began to grow. By the late 1970s, the church had flourished to a congregation of over 5,000, a testament to the family's unwavering faith and dedication. Through these years, Joel watched quietly. Unlike his siblings, who eagerly stepped forward to preach and serve, Joel preferred the shadows, focusing on supporting the church behind the scenes. His academic journey reflected this practical mindset. After finishing high school at Humble High in 1981, he briefly attended Oral Roberts University to study radio and television. However, he left after less than a year, feeling that earning a degree was less important than working alongside his father to build the church. At just 19 years old, Joel returned to Houston to manage the church's television ministry, an unglamorous but crucial role that would unknowingly prepare him for future leadership. For nearly 17 years, Joel stayed behind the camera, producing and editing the sermons his father preached. His focus was on perfection, lighting, camera angles, even what his father wore every Sunday. Joel's goal was to present Lakewood as a polished, professional ministry that could compete with any mainstream media production. Though he had no formal theological training, he learned deeply from watching and editing hundreds of sermons. Still, he resisted stepping onto the stage himself. When his father asked him to preach, Joel declined, convinced his strength was making the church look good on television rather than standing in front of a crowd. What many don't realize is how much those years behind the scenes shaped Joel's unique style. He absorbed the power of presentation, understanding that a message could only move people if it was delivered in a way they could see, feel, and connect with. Joel meticulously studied the art of timing, pacing, and audience engagement, not from a seminary classroom, but from countless hours of observing his father's delivery, the congregation's reactions, and even mainstream television programming. He wasn't just producing a church broadcast, he was crafting a show. Despite his reluctance to preach, Joel's presence was gradually becoming more noticeable. He began giving short messages occasionally and filling in for his father during illnesses or travel.
We want to wish you and your family a very Merry Christmas and tell you how much we love you.
These moments were met with surprise. Here was a man with a calm demeanor, an easy smile, and an encouraging word that resonated deeply with listeners. Unlike the fiery, guilt-driven sermons common in many churches, Joel's approach was gentle, optimistic, and focused on hope and personal empowerment. But he remained humble, aware that the pulpit wasn't his place. Yet. During this time, the family experienced both growth and hardship. The church was expanding rapidly, and John Osteen became a beloved figure in Houston and beyond. However, the pressure of leading a large congregation weighed heavily on him. His health began to decline, and in 1998, he passed away after battling brain cancer. Joel, then 39, was thrust into an unexpected position. The church needed a leader, but many doubted whether he was ready. After all, Joel had never seen himself as a preacher, much less a megachurch pastor. Yet, the congregation's trust and his years of experience behind the camera gave Joel a quiet confidence. He stepped up not with grand declarations, but with a steady, reassuring presence. His first sermons as senior pastor were markedly different, shorter, more personal, and deeply focused on uplifting messages. Joel's gift wasn't in theological complexity, but in his ability to make faith feel accessible, relevant, and positive. What followed was a transformation not only for Joel, but for Lakewood Church itself. Under his leadership, the church grew exponentially, expanding both physically and digitally. Joel used his background in media to push Lakewood's television ministry to new heights, turning it into a global broadcast that reached millions. He understood better than most how to harness the power of media to spread his message far beyond Houston's city limits. His rise was not just about charisma or message, it was about timing and cultural need. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, many Americans were searching for a faith that emphasized hope and personal betterment rather than condemnation. Joel's sermons, books, and appearances filled that space perfectly.
#1 New York Times best-selling author Joel Osteen delivers his newest book, Think Better, Live Better.
His journey from behind-the-scenes technician to the pulpit was the quiet but powerful unfolding of a new kind of pastor, one who understood that faith could be shared not only through words, but through the way those words were presented. Despite the soaring success, Joel's leadership style maintained that sense of humility and authenticity. He often spoke about his own struggles with self-confidence and public speaking, sharing how he once thought he'd never be a pastor. This vulnerability endeared him to millions who saw in him a reflection of their own uncertainties and aspirations. Looking back, it's clear that Joel Osteen's quiet beginnings were anything but insignificant. The years spent perfecting the craft behind the camera, supporting his father, and learning the rhythms of communication were the foundation upon which a global ministry was built. It wasn't a flashy or traditional start, but it was one that prepared him for a moment when faith, media, and culture would collide, and he would be ready to lead. The sudden shift from reluctance to leadership. Everything changed in January 1999. After years of behind-the-scenes work, Joel agreed to preach his first sermon on the 17th of that month. Only 6 days later, tragedy struck. John Osteen died suddenly of a heart attack.
John had cardiac arrest in our home at 2 o'clock in the morning on Friday or Saturday morning, and I'll just tell you this very shortly.
With no warning, Joel found himself thrust into the role of senior pastor for a congregation of 6,000. He was unprepared and unsure, lacking formal preaching experience and overwhelmed by the responsibility. Doubters questioned his readiness to lead, yet Joel rose to the challenge. Within 5 years, the church underwent a dramatic transformation. By 2004, weekly attendance skyrocketed to between 25,000 and 30,000, making Lakewood the largest church in America. This explosive growth was no accident. Joel doubled the television airtime budget, secured the best time slots in major cities, and blanketed highways with billboards promoting the church. But the real secret to his success lay in his sermons. Simple, hopeful messages that focused on dreams, self-belief, and trusting God's plan.
I believe that if we don't see each day as a gift from God, it's easy to not live life to the full.
Joel's words were a stark contrast to the traditional preaching of sin and judgment. He offered instead a vision of a joyful, blessed life that resonated deeply with a wide audience. Yet the church's physical space was no longer enough. Joel dreamed bigger. He spoke openly about preaching to 100,000 people every weekend, a vision met with skepticism by many. Then came his boldest move. In 2003, Lakewood signed a lease for the Compaq Center, a former basketball arena that once housed the Houston Rockets. The lease was $12 million for 30 years, with an option to extend. The renovation costs shocked many. Nearly $95 million was poured into transforming the sports arena into a magnificent place of worship. The arena was gutted, rebuilt, and outfitted with 5 floors, waterfalls, thousands of yards of carpet, classrooms, and state-of-the-art broadcast studios. The grand opening in July 2005 was a milestone. The arena, renamed Lakewood Church, filled every seat with 16,000 attendees, while millions more watched on television. For Houston residents, the transformation was symbolic. The place once filled with NBA stars now echoed with worship, music, and hope. The church continued to grow, eventually hosting more than 40,000 visitors weekly and broadcasting to over 10 million viewers across 100 countries. Joel's unique approach to preaching, steering away from fear and judgment to embrace encouragement and hope, cemented his place as a religious and media powerhouse. His sermons promised that life could improve, that people were not broken, and that better days were ahead. Critics called this Christian light, arguing that he avoided discussing sin and salvation, but his followers remained devoted, drawn to his positivity and message of empowerment. Joel's media savvy was unparalleled. Within a few years, Lakewood's television broadcast reached 92% of American households, making it one of the most widely viewed religious programs in the nation. Weekly, 10 million Americans tuned in, with millions more watching globally, amplifying Joel's influence far beyond the church walls. However, behind the scenes, controversy grew. Joel's lifestyle, including a $10.5 million mansion, raised eyebrows, especially when his ministry received $4.4 million in COVID-19 loans intended for small businesses.
Joel Osteen denounced as grifting scumbag after his megachurch pockets millions in COVID-19 relief. Number is $4.4 million.
Questions emerged about the church's financial priorities, as critics pointed out that only a small fraction of Lakewood's budget went to charity. Tickets to Joel's speaking events cost $15, and despite preaching wealth, his programs seldom addressed sin or the core tenets of traditional Christianity. When faced with criticism, Joel's response was to purchase another $3 million home, deepening public scrutiny. Attendance eventually began to decline, and cracks appeared in the seemingly perfect image. Yet for many, Lakewood remained a beacon of hope, a place where faith and positivity offered comfort amid life's uncertainties. Joel Osteen's story is one of transformation, from a young man behind the scenes to a global figurehead who changed the face of modern American Christianity. It is a story of faith, media, ambition, and the complex intersection of belief and business. The rise of a modern megachurch empire. By 2017, Joel Osteen's Lakewood Church had transformed from a local congregation into a sprawling media powerhouse with annual media spending reaching $25 million. Yet, these massive investments were no gamble. they paid off in ways that redefined what a modern church could be. Joel Osteen was no ordinary pastor. He was a charismatic figure who harnessed the power of mainstream media, celebrity, and motivational speaking to deliver a message that was clear, simple, and overwhelmingly positive. From XM radio to sold-out stadium events, Joel's influence grew exponentially, captivating millions with his vision of hope, success, and personal transformation. This chapter dives deeper into the explosive growth of Joel Osteen's ministry, the strategic expansions, the booming business behind the brand, and the controversies that shadowed this evangelical giant. We'll also explore the pivotal role of his wife, Victoria, the next generation of the Osteen family stepping into the spotlight, and the growing tensions as critics question the priorities of Lakewood's billion-dollar empire. This is the story of faith, fame, fortune, and the complex dynamics of running one of America's largest churches in the 21st century. The media machine and the business of faith. When Joel Osteen released Your Best Life Now in October 2004, few expected much from the first-time author and pastor. He was neither a celebrity nor a traditionally famous figure. Yet, within just 3 months, the book had sold over 500,000 copies, and by May 2005, it had passed the 1 million mark. Remarkably, it remained on the New York Times bestseller list for more than 200 consecutive weeks, nearly 4 years, and sold over 4 million copies worldwide. What made Your Best Life Now so groundbreaking was not just its sales, but how it blurred the lines between Christian literature and popular self-help. Joel's blend of faith, motivation, and simple hope connected not only with churchgoers, but with a broad audience that often avoided traditional religious texts. His warm, approachable tone made the complex ideas of spiritual growth feel attainable and practical. The book did more than establish Joel's celebrity. It fundamentally changed the publishing world for religious authors. Suddenly, pastors could become bestsellers with messages that leaned heavily on personal success and positivity rather than doctrine or theology. But Joel didn't stop at one hit book. He expanded his literary portfolio to over 15 books, 7 of which also reached the New York Times bestseller list. The 2005 book, Become a Better You Alone, earned him an estimated $13 million in royalties and advances. Beyond books, his live events skyrocketed in popularity. Joel began to command speaking fees between $100,000 and $200,000 per event, filling arenas across the U.S. and internationally. Lakewood's gift shop and online store boomed, selling books, CDs, apparel, and branded gifts, cementing the church not just as a spiritual hub, but a consumer brand. The social media revolution only amplified this reach. Joel amassed 25 million Facebook followers, 10 million on Twitter, and 5 million on Instagram, further expanding his platform to new generations. Then came Night of Hope, a nationwide arena tour launched in 2013. Unlike free church services, these events sold tickets, usually around $15, and drew tens of thousands of people. On March 11, 2013, over 20,000 packed Miami's American Airlines Arena just to hear Joel speak. The shows, often likened to concerts, featured music, lighting, and a palpable energy of hope and motivation. Cities like New York, Los Angeles, London, and eventually Wembley Arena in London became regular stops. In 2017 alone, Lakewood spent $6.7 million producing these events, yet the return was massive, not just financially, but culturally. Night of Hope transformed faith gatherings into global productions, redefining what modern evangelical events looked like. Joel's approach was unconventional. He bypassed traditional religious platforms and took his message to mainstream media. Appearances on Oprah, Larry King Live, and Good Morning America exposed his message to millions who might never watch Christian television or attend church.
live stream services. Pastor Joel Osteen led his services without an in-person audience, streamed his sermon to worshipers all across this great country.
His 2005 interview with Larry King thrust him into the spotlight, and his 2012 conversation with Oprah confronted critics head-on, particularly those skeptical of his prosperity gospel. Joel spoke little of sin or judgment. Instead, he focused on hope, success, and belief in oneself. More motivational coach than traditional preacher. This deliberate strategy worked. Today, Joel Osteen reaches over 10 million people weekly through TV, podcasts, social media, and live events, carrying a message of positivity and resilience. Financially, the Osteen brand is staggering. It pulls in around $55 million annually, while Lakewood Church operates with a $90 million yearly budget. Yet, critics point out that only about 1.3%, roughly $1.2 million, is allocated to missions and outreach. The lion's share funds weekly services, media production, events, and administrative costs. This spending breakdown raises questions. Is Lakewood more a media empire than a traditional church? Joel himself hasn't taken a salary since 2004. His personal wealth, estimated between $50 million and $100 million, comes primarily from book royalties and speaking engagements. This financial success sparks ongoing debates about whether the prosperity gospel is genuinely about faith or personal gain. The family behind the ministry, Victoria Osteen and the next generation. Joel Osteen's path to mega pastor fame wasn't traveled alone. His wife, Victoria, has been an essential partner in building the Lakewood ministry and expanding its influence. Their story began humbly. In 1985, Joel walked into a Houston jewelry store simply to replace a watch battery. There, he met Victoria, a psychology student working in her family's store. Their connection was immediate, and by April 4, 1987, they were married. At the time, Joel was working behind the scenes at his father's church, far from the spotlight he would later command. Victoria's background added a unique dimension to the ministry. Her father was a NASA engineer involved in the Saturn rocket project, and her mother a dedicated Sunday school teacher. Together, they blended faith and science, grounding the ministry in a balance of spiritual optimism and practical outreach. Victoria quickly grew beyond a supporting role. In 2003, she launched Lakewood's women's ministry, which rapidly expanded to serve thousands annually. Her presence on stage became as influential as Joel's. Victoria's warm, authentic connection with the audience made her a beloved figure in her own right. She also became a successful author. Her debut book, Love Your Life, launched in 2008 with a first print run of 750,000 copies and debuted at number 2 on the New York Times bestseller list, a remarkable achievement for someone who once worked retail. Victoria often emphasizes emotional healing, famously stating, "If you don't heal from emotional wounds, you will bleed on people that had nothing to do with it." Her journey from jewelry counter clerk to nationally recognized pastor embodies the ministry's themes of growth, healing, and relentless energy. The Osteen children, Jonathan and Alexandra, also play critical roles in the family ministry. Raised in the heart of Lakewood's world, they've stepped into leadership positions early on. Jonathan, born in 1995, studied radio, television, and film at the University of Texas at Austin and was already leading worship as a teenager. By 2016, both siblings performed in front of tens of thousands, including massive events like America's Night of Hope. Jonathan writes and produces music for Lakewood's young adult ministry, while Alexandra became a lead vocalist for the worship band LYA, with songs streamed by hundreds of thousands. Their faith-filled music is a crucial part of Lakewood's identity today. Joel Osteen's journey from a quiet, behind-the-scenes role to becoming one of the most influential voices in modern Christianity is a testament to the unexpected ways leadership and purpose can unfold. What began as a humble commitment to supporting his father's vision in the shadows ultimately blossomed into a powerful ministry that reaches millions worldwide. His story reminds us that greatness doesn't always announce itself with bold declarations or immediate spotlight. Sometimes it grows steadily, patiently, shaped by unseen dedication and a willingness to serve in whatever capacity life calls us to. At the heart of Joel's success lies a profound understanding of connection. He knows that faith, above all, is deeply personal, a source of hope that must be delivered with warmth, authenticity, and accessibility. His messages are not about guilt or fear, but about possibility, healing, and transformation. This fresh approach resonates across generations, cultures, and backgrounds, drawing people who are seeking encouragement in a complex and often challenging world. Joel's rise also highlights the transformative power of media in the modern age. By mastering the tools of television and digital broadcast, he expanded the reach of Lakewood Church beyond physical walls, turning it into a global community. In an era where connection often feels fragmented, his ability to use media to foster a sense of belonging and spiritual renewal is remarkable. It's a reminder that the way we communicate is just as important as what we communicate, and that embracing new methods can open doors to unforeseen opportunities. Yet, beyond the fame and the large audiences, Joel's story remains grounded in humility. He often speaks openly about his own doubts and imperfections, inviting others to find strength not in being flawless, but in embracing their journey with faith and courage. This authenticity invites us all to consider our own potential for growth, no matter where we start or what doubts we carry. The quiet years spent behind the camera were not a detour, but a crucial preparation, shaping a leader who could inspire without preaching fire and brimstone, who could lead without overshadowing those around him. Joel Osteen teaches us that sometimes the greatest power lies in patience, in unseen work, and in the gentle, steady nurturing of a vision. As we reflect on his path, we see more than just the story of a megachurch pastor. We see a universal narrative about perseverance, service, and the unfolding of a calling that often arrives when we least expect it. Joel's life encourages us to embrace our own unique journey, to trust the quiet seasons, and to prepare ourselves, whether behind the scenes or in the spotlight, for the moments when we, too, might be called to step forward and shine. In a world hungry for hope and meaning, Joel Osteen's story is a powerful reminder. Sometimes the most profound influence comes not from loud proclamations, but from a steady voice that speaks directly to the heart. And sometimes, the greatest beginnings are the quiet ones,